Hello, shall we start, sir?
Yes, I think we'll start. Shall we?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Ravichandra,
Ravichandra.
Ravichandra, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Ravichandra.
I'm ready. Yeah, ready, sir.
Slides are ready? Yeah. Okay, then we'll start. So, good evening to everyone who is watching and participating in this session of psychopathology. Today, this is the second session in psychopathology, and the presenter is again Dr. Ravichandra Karkala. He is the Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Yanapoya Medical College and Postgraduate Center in Mangalore. And last time, you have heard him discuss in detail the disorder of stream and form of thought. And I am sure all of you are benefited to learn the subtle differences between various forms of thought disorder, which do contribute to your diagnosis, apart from being of interesting nature in terms of its description. Now, today, in continuation of same thought disorders, he is going to present disorders of possession and contents of thought. And I think we are going to listen to him and know more things about the concepts of disorders under these two titles. And following his presentation, there will be question and answer sessions. So I request Dr. Ravichandra to start. Dr. Ravichandra, please.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for the introduction. I would like to thank once again Indian Psychiatric Society Karnataka chapter for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be, to be speaking about the first two sessions of this series on psychopathology. So, which is a very unique initiative to encourage postgraduates to, learn more about phenomenology and psychopathology, which will help them to become better psychiatrists and clinicians. So, as sir already told, we discussed about form and stream of thought and disorders of stream and form in the last session. So today I'll be focusing on content and possession disorders. Basically last time we discussed about what are thoughts and ideas, what are the functions of thinking, what are the types of thinking and such stuff. We also discussed about the progress or flow of ideas, which is basically the stream of thought. And we looked at various disorders of stream. We looked at the conceptual organization of ideas or form of thought. And we saw formal thought disorder, various forms of, formal thought disorder. And what is very interesting is that stream and form disorders are of great interest for the clinician, for the psychiatrist. But a patient is not bothered about whether he has desultory thinking or transitory thinking, or he's not bothered about whether he has flight of ideas or prolixity or circumstantial thinking. So stream and form are aspects of thought disorders which are mostly a clinician's interest. Whereas today's topic, which is on content and possession of thought, this can be of great interest for the patient. These can be the presenting problems for the patient, or it may be the presenting problem for people around the patient, right? So we will discuss about what are ideas made of, and which is probably, you can call it as content of thought, and whether the person feels in control of his thoughts, whether it is under his will or volition, and we will look at this can be called as possession of thought, and we will look at disorders of possession of thought. So this will be the basic outline for today's presentation. Now coming to thought content. So we will be focusing mostly on 4 entities, that is delusions, overvalued ideas, suicidal thoughts, and homicidal thoughts. Now, when we think of, or when we talk about delusions, we definitely have to look into the form of delusions, various forms in which delusions occur, and the content of delusions, right? And again, form of delusions is mostly of interest to clinician, whereas content of those delusions is of great interest, or it may be it may be a matter of great concern for the patient or people around them. So we will first look at various forms of delusions. So before I start talking about forms of delusions, we will have to really understand the differences between what are ideas, overvalued ideas, and delusion. How do we differentiate basically between these 3 things, right? So an idea is, any thought that is coming in your mind right now. Like, for example, I may be thinking about having a fresh cup of coffee right now because I am tired preparing for this seminar. So that's basically an idea that I am getting at this point of time, right? So let's look at some of the variations that you may get in thoughts and ideas. For example, let's look at this. Most of us have learned this in WhatsApp University. India's national anthem is declared best in the world by UNESCO, right? So I'm sure many of your uncles and aunts were really convinced that India's national anthem is the best, right? And they kept on forwarding it, and it's a viral message, right? So for a short duration of time, many of your family members would have believed that India's national anthem is definitely the best in the world, and it is declared by the UNESCO, right? So it is a false belief, right? But is that a delusion? So but your uncle and aunt, you just open up some websites and convince them that this is basically fake news, and we don't know why people are circulating this. They may get convinced with what evidence you are giving. Okay, so this is a false belief which is quite shakeable, right? So this is not very the individual is not very convinced about it once you give a counter argument or you give evidence to the contrary. Now let us look at another thought, another scenario. Basically, a virology professor believes SARS-CoV-2, the COVID virus, was made in the Chinese lab in Wuhan. Okay, so the scenario doesn't stop there. This virology professor, once he got this idea that this was a man-made virus in a Chinese lab, he dedicated most of his work in the laboratory. In fact, he had a deficiency of funds, but he, poured in his savings. He's a university professor. He has accumulated some, meager amount of money, but still he is pouring in that money on buying equipment, buying various, stuff to basically prove that this is a man-made virus, right? And he goes to such an extent that he just becomes financially devastated. His wife and family is upset with him because he's not coming home till he's he proves to the whole world that this is prepared in a Chinese lab. Okay, now this is a belief which is quite unshakable in this case, but what we have to believe is various governments around the world still believe that SARS-CoV-2 was made in a Chinese lab, despite the World Health Organization and a team from WHO telling that it's probably transmitted from animal species, right? So a lot of people still believe this. So the virology professor still believes this, right? So it is in keeping with the society, the educational, or because he's a virology professor, definitely he should be thinking about, of course, every virology professor would have thought that it's a man-made virus when the rumors started flowing in. So it is not like, it is in keeping with the worldview. At least a chunk of the world believes that this is true, right? But and it seems quite plausible also, right? So it doesn't seem like a completely implausible idea. right? So here, what we can see is this virology professor is, is having an idea which is predominating all other ideas, okay? And it is associated with so much conviction, and it is associated with so much affective tone and emotional tone that he's spending his savings, he's devastating his fortunes to prove that this was made in a lab. And my friends, this is the example for a overvalued idea, right? So now let's look at what is a delusion. Let's look at this, a similar scenario. A virology professor believes SARS-CoV-2 was made in a Chinese lab, but how did he come to this conclusion? Because the Chinese premier was wearing a red pin on his coat when he announced about the Wuhan virus, or the virus SARS-CoV-2, which was found in Wuhan first. So he was wearing a red pin on his coat, that told him that, he was sure looking at that this is a man-made virus and it was produced in Wuhan's Chinese lab, right? So what you can see here is there is a false belief. It is held with great, great amount of conviction. And how did he come to this conclusion? Basically, the jump from the evidence to the conclusion, right? The evidence is the red pin on the coat, and the conclusion is that it is made in China. So that jump from that evidence to conclusion appears very difficult to understand, right? So this is an example of a delusion. So I hope you have got an idea about what is idea, what is a overvalued idea, and what is a delusion. Now, if you look at the definition of delusion, so there are various definitions given in Fish, Sims, and no matter how many descriptive psychopathology textbooks you will open, there are multiple definitions. So one of the very widely accepted definitions is a delusion is a false, unshakable belief, which is held with great conviction, which is of morbid origin, which is not in keeping with the person's educational, social, cultural background, right? And it is continued to be held despite giving evidence to the contrary. Probably that is a very holistic, very wholesome definition of a delusion. Now, let us look at some of the conceptual issues surrounding this definition of delusion. Okay, so what is the defining feature of a delusion, right? So what aspect of this phenomena or the psychopathology is what makes it very, very characteristic, and it defines basically a delusion. So is it that it has to be a false belief? Just because somebody has a false belief, does it mean the person has the delusion? As we saw in the first example, national anthem being the best in the world, it's a false belief, right? But it need not be a delusion. Also, overvalued idea is also false belief, as we saw in the virology professor who was thinking that virus is made from Chinese lab, right? And many sensitive people, for example, if you see a patient with social phobia, he will tell you, doctor, as soon as I enter the bank, I feel as if everyone in the bank is looking at me. Everybody is judging me. Everybody is looking at my clothes and laughing at me. So even a sensitive person, a person with some social phobia and such traits may also believe that, may have such beliefs, right? False beliefs. But definitely it is not a delusion, right? Especially if you're thinking of social phobia, that is not a false belief, right? I'm sorry, that it is not a delusion, okay? And obsessions are also false beliefs, right? So the individual believes that his hands are full with germs, it is a false belief. So just if a phenomena is a false belief, you cannot call it as a delusion. So if somebody has extraordinary conviction in a belief, does that mean it is a delusion? No. Many of the normal belief systems, normal beliefs that we have are also held with extraordinary conviction. And, interestingly, many times, even a person who has a delusion may not have very extraordinary conviction. The conviction may be slightly shakeable, okay? And especially if they are on treatment, if they are already put on antipsychotics, you have seen your patients having, his belief is usually shakeable. That means they don't have They have a big delusion still, but they do not have extraordinary conviction. And normal beliefs also have extraordinary conviction. So that may not be a defining feature. Then Stoddart, one of the researchers, he told that, if a belief is out of keeping with the background, that is the social, cultural, and, educational background of a person, then you can call it as a delusion. But again, you can see that many of the delusions that we see in our individuals are not really out of keeping with the background. For example, an individual who comes from a rural area may believe that, some black magic is done by his neighbors because he got a lemon, and he saw some kumkum, okay, beside his home, right? And he directly jumped to the conclusion that some black magic is done, So this is not in out of keeping with the background, because obviously, especially in Karnataka, in these parts, people do believe in black magic. All over India, people believe in black magic, but still he may have a delusion, right? So it need not be always out of keeping with the background, okay? And many people say that if it is out of keeping with the background, it is easier to identify, right? So it is not a defining feature, very characteristic feature, but if it is out of keeping with the background, it is easily recognizable. So if a person from the rural background comes with a belief that he saw a lemon and somebody has done a black magic, you would think twice before calling it as a delusion, because you know that people around his home in his neighborhood also believe in such cultural things, right? But if the same virology professor from, who is investigating this virus, COVID virus, if he starts telling that there is a lemon outside his flat and he believes that black magic is done, it is very easily recognizable. You don't have any doubt. A virology professor thinking about black magic seems very odd, right? So that is the issue with making out of keeping with the background as a defining feature of a delusion. Now, whether, the way they come to a conclusion from evidence to the conclusion, the faulty conclusion, basically, whether that is a defining feature, need not be, right? For example, an overvalued idea, I told, it may be a faulty conclusion. Obsession may be a faulty conclusion, but still these are, very different from delusions, okay? So, but no doubt, all delusions are due to faulty conclusions, right? And is plausibility a defining feature? I already told, many of the delusions that we see in patients are quite plausible. For example, delusion of infidelity. There is a good chance that the patient's spouse may be cheating on him or her, right? So there is, even plausible things can be delusions, right? So implausibility is not the defining feature, right? So that's why Jaspers, what he told was that ununderstandability, okay? So ununderstandability was a very characteristic feature of delusion. That is, you will not be able to understand, when in your cultural or societal setting, the kind of ideas that this patient or this individual comes up with, is very difficult to understand. You definitely cannot break it down to some understandable phenomena, right? That's why it is ununderstandable, okay? So that's what Jaspers highlighted. And Hamilton, what he told was delusion, arises out of an internal morbid process. So there is an internal morbid process which should be going on, which becomes a very important defining feature of delusion. This feature is very well highlighted in an example. Take for example, one of your patient has a belief that his wife is cheating on him, right? And sometimes you'll be surprised, the wife may be actually cheating on him, but still you can make a you can come to a conclusion of a delusion in this patient if he is coming to this conclusion. The jump from the evidence to the conclusion is ununderstandable, and if it is due to some internal morbid process. So basically, if a person, instead of catching his wife red-handed, okay, when in the act, if he looks at a hair on the sari of his wife and comes to the conclusion that she is unfaithful, then that is ununderstandable, or there is a morbid origin. There is some internal morbid process that is happening, which is leading to the jump from the evidence, which is not enough, to the conclusion, which is a delusion, right? So these are some of the important conceptual issues that you should understand about the definition of delusion, so that you are very, very strong in making a conclusion of a delusion. Now, there is one more concept which is discussed in the research circles. So whether a delusion is a belief or a judgment. Okay, so Spitzer and Berrios, they say that individuals with schizophrenia, they don't say that I believe I am God. They say that I know I am God. So basically, researchers like Spitzer and Berrios, what they have, what they have promulgated is that a delusion may be just a false judgment or a faulty judgment. It is a little different from a belief. Okay, but in our day-to-day practice and for all practical purposes, we can definitely call delusion as a false belief, false unshakable belief, and I'll not repeat the definition, as well as a faulty judgment or a false judgment. Okay, so these are some of the conceptual issues surrounding the definition of delusion. Now, we also should understand what are the vectors of delusion. So, vectors are basically parameters with which you assess the severity of a delusion, right? So these parameters are not very well correlated. Okay, and each individual, each patient of yours may have varying grades of these vectors, right? But some of these vectors were given by Kendler, right? And Kendler, what he described was, he described 5 vectors of delusion or delusional severity. One is conviction, that is how strong is this belief. Okay, how much amenable it is to counter argument, or whether it breaks down when you give evidence to the contrary, right? Then extension, as the word itself is self-explanatory, it tells that whether it is spreading to all the aspects of life of this individual, right? How extensive is it, right? What aspects of the life of that particular individual this belief is pervading. The third aspect is bizarreness. Bizarreness is, how much is it out of keeping with the background of this individual? How much is it culturally deviant? How much is deviant from the societal beliefs of that individual? That is bizarreness. And disorganization. What disorganization means is, this disorganization is slightly different from your formal thought disorder disorganization. What disorganization basically means here is, how systematic is this delusion? How internally consistent are these ideas or network of ideas that this individual has built, when he is creating this world of delusions? Okay, that is disorganization. What is pressure? Pressure is how much is this person, pressured to think about it, or how much is this person preoccupied with this belief, right? So these are the 5 vectors of delusion given by Kendler. There are other 2 which we definitely see in our patients. One is affective response. How is the emotional response of this individual, when he has this kind of a belief, and also whether there is any deviant behavior secondary to this belief. That is, whether this person is acting out on the belief. Okay, so we should keep in mind these vectors of delusion when we are, doing an MSc, or when we are monitoring a patient for resolution of symptoms. These are, very essential to keep in mind. Then the next question comes, how do delusions develop? What are the sources of delusional development? Okay, let's look at some of the possible ways by which delusion originates. Okay, so first is, an individual may have a perceptual disturbance, and that perceptual disturbance may lead to intense emotions, and that will lead to compromised self-assessment and judgment, leading to the delusion, right? For example, if an individual with alcoholic hallucinosis, he has a hallucination and the voice keeps telling him that you are no good, and it will tell him you go and kill yourself, right? So, the person is hearing this hallucination for some time, for a month or so, and later he starts developing this belief secondary to this perception, false perception or hallucination, that there are some people who are out to get him. Some people are behind him, they want to harm him, right? So basically there is a perceptual disturbance which leads to intense emotions, and leads to compromised self-assessment and judgment. When you are pervaded with intense emotions, your judgment just gets suspended. For example, you go to the theater, okay? You know, when you go to the theater that whatever is being shown on the screen is false, right? It is not reality. But if it is a very good horror movie, right, by something which is very scary, your autonomic arousal is as good as you are, watching some devils in your home, right? So your judgment, your self-assessment and judgment will not be of any use when you are taken over by that intense emotion. So a horror movie will only click if that can create such emotions, the sound effects, the vision, the visuals. If they create that intense emotion, your self-assessment and judgment will be suspended. Then you will start becoming so fearful. And that's why you really enjoy the thrill of watching a horror movie. But if it is a very, bakwas horror movie, you will definitely laugh at the end of it because it did not really create that thrill inside you. It did not really scare you, correct? In the same manner, when somebody has a hallucination, it can be a very fearful experience, and that person's thinking and judgment can get compromised. So this is a source of development of delusion. So in these kind of patients, there may not be a cognitive disturbance, because sometimes we think that a delusion arises because of disturbance in cognitive processes. It may be the case in certain individuals, but in such individuals where perception is leading to a secondary delusion, there may not be any cognitive disturbance. Also, patients with schizophrenia, especially, and many psychotic disorders, they have deficits in processing gestalts. One of my patients, when I was talking with him, he told me, instead of looking at my whole face, he was looking at my lips only, right? And in between the interview, he became very scared. So I asked him, you were just looking at my lips, and why did you suddenly become so scared? So he told me, when you were talking, doctor, you smiled and there was some, asymmetrical, I'm using this technical term, of course he used some other words, there is an asymmetrical, extension of these muscles, the lip moved much further than this lip. Okay. That's why I know that you are, in hands, you are basically with the conspirators who I am running away from, right? So basically what is happening in that individual is I'm trying to be friendly with him. I'm trying to establish a rapport with him, and I'm trying to, smile in between when it is appropriate. But that individual does not see the full facial expression or the full smile. He's just looking at one part of the lip and coming to a faulty conclusion, right? So there can be perceptual, deficits in perceptual processing or processing of perceptions, especially when you are not able to see when you get, when you get lost in the trees and you do not look at the forest, right? That's what happens in many of our patients with schizophrenia. Such perceptual disturbances can lead to delusions. Another source of development of delusions may be intense emotions which you can see in mania, which is elation, and in depression, where you see severe sadness. Okay, such intense emotions can lead to abnormal memories. For example, a patient with depression who is feeling extremely sad, he only remembers memories of things which he's not very proud of, the mistakes that he has done, his past failures, all that keep coming one after the other. So there is some sort of a recall bias. He's not able to recall all his achievements and all the good things that he has done in his life, and he's only able to recall all the failures, all the mistakes. So that adds on to the sadness, right? Whereas an individual with mania, it will be completely opposite. He's not able to look at all the problems that he has created in his business when he went on a grandiose plan of extending his business like Ambani. He thinks that he's as big a businessman as Ambani. He'll become the biggest industrialist in India. And, he starts pouring money, crores of rupees, and he loses, right? But he is unable to recollect those failures, right? And he's always only thinking, because of elation, he's only thinking of these memories where he has made some money, quick money, right? So such abnormal memories and recall bias will lead to compromised judgment again and lead to delusions, right? This can be seen, of course, in mood disorders like depression, mania, and bipolar disorder. Another thing is where there is a cognitive disturbance. Okay, a cognitive disturbance which can be seen in a dementing process, okay, which can be seen in various neurological disorders, right? Or even in patients with long-standing chronic psychosis, right? So the cognitive disturbance leads to faulty thinking and self-monitoring, okay? Faulty self-monitoring. So basically, a individual thinks like, his thought process goes like this. He thinks that all Martians are green, correct? People from Mars, we imagine, the aliens in Mars are green in color. So all, Martians are green. My dad is wearing a green shirt today, so he is also a Martian, right? So basically, he is unable to recognize that kind of a jump from, Martians are green to father wearing a green shirt means it is that he is a Martian, is a jump, it's a jump to conclusion, which is basically an example for faulty thinking, but he's unable to monitor that kind of the jump that he has made. He's unable to self-monitor that. So basically that leads to the development of delusion. Okay. So this can be seen in various cognitive disturbances, like an alcohol-induced dementia or a HIV, induced dementia. It can be seen in various dementias, organic disorders. All right. And even in schizophrenias. Then you can have some disturbances in memory, which can lead to a delusional development. So some people, take for example, there is a person who has a delusional disorder or a schizophrenic disorder. So what happens is when he is in the process of developing these delusions, he watches out from his home on the streets and he sees that a black car, a fully black car with black shades, the windows are colored with black color so that you cannot see inside the car. Okay. He watches that car in the street opposite his home, and immediately he comes to the conclusion that this car standing, this black car with black windows standing right opposite to my home is definitely something very, very fishy. And I think some conspiracy is going on, right? And at that moment, a neighbor comes and talks with the person who is there in that car. And this person again thinks, it convinces him further that yes, my neighbor is also involved with these people, right? So what is happening here is basically such cars have been parked opposite his house many times during his life, right? But he is unable to recollect that memory at that point of time. That is a bias in recollection of memory. And that kind of a memory disturbance leads to salience of non-relevant stimuli. That is, a car, black car standing outside your house is basically, it can be just a non-relevant thing, right? So, but you give a lot of importance and significance to that, which is called salience. So there is salience on non-relevant stimuli because of the selective, recall of memories, and that leads to faulty thinking and development of delusions. So these are some of the sources of delusional development. What are the other sources? One is temperament and personality, right? For example, you take a person who has paranoid personality disorder. He is already suspicious. He already has a lot of mistrust. Upon that, if somebody, if something very stressful happens in his life, he starts coming to the conclusion that he always has suspected his neighbor that they keep creating trouble around his house. Now he starts thinking that they have poisoned the water in the overhead tank, okay? And they will kill me today, right? So some kind of personalities, or a sensitive personality, for example, a very shy personality, when he is under a very stressful situation, if somebody laughs, who is sitting next to him, he may think that, okay, he is laughing because I'm smelling too bad. Okay. I have a very bad odor from my mouth. That's why he's smiling. Okay. So a shy personality can lead to such a delusion. So temperament and personality can lead to development of delusion, can contribute. Then when there is a threat to self-esteem, for example, you can see in mania, if there is a person who is incurring a lot of financial losses, he's a great businessman in his town, he's a popular figure in his town, and here, during COVID, his hotel closes down and he is a pauper. Okay. He goes completely bankrupt and he's unable to, cope with the threat to his self-esteem. How can he live like an ordinary person? He was a millionaire, few months ago, right? So the threat to the self-esteem may lead him to develop some delusions. Then depersonalization. This is beautifully, seen in a case of culture-bound syndrome like Koro. Because of depersonalization, the individual starts believing that his penis is becoming small and, it is shrinking in size. It is going into his abdomen. It will completely go into his abdomen and disappear. and that will lead to death of him, right? So that kind of a depersonalization will lead to development of a delusion that he's going to die today, right? So it's beautifully elicited in Koro. Or there may be social reasons. For example, the individual lives in a household where, it is utter chaos. Okay. There is domestic violence. Imagine a child whose parents are having domestic violence from his young age, and they are in the process of going through a delusion, in the process of going through a divorce. And, the mother is so fed up and fed up of the domestic violence that she has started doing all hard drugs, right? So the individual is unable to accept that painful reality. The child is unable to accept that painful reality and develops a delusion, develops a delusion that he's God. Okay. He's come on a mission to this earth to change everyone, right? And that somehow becomes a defense against his painful reality. So there may be social reasons for development of delusion. Then there may be, in some cases, autochthonous delusions. Autochthonous delusions are de novo delusions, which just completely come out of the blue. You may not have these other contributing factors, or you may have very meager contributing factors, but still the individual, because of some genetic vulnerability or some neuropathological vulnerability, develops a idea, which is de novo, and it's a false idea. Okay. So the autochthonous delusion may not have any background. Now, what are the types of delusion based on origin? Okay, so these are some forms of delusion which is very important in our day-to-day practice. One is primary delusions or true delusions. What are primary delusions? You cannot phenomenologically break it down to some other morbid phenomena, right? So, for example, I am already suspicious that my neighbors are planning to kill me. Okay, now when I'm doing the webinar, although I'm wearing earphones, I hear a knock on my door. Okay, and I immediately, come to the conclusion that my neighbor has come and standing outside the door. Okay. And I go, into complete panic. See, that is an example for a secondary delusion, because there is already this morbid phenomenon of this false, unshakable belief that my neighbors are out to get me, right? But in primary delusions, there is no such morbidity, or there is no such morbid phenomena which can explain this new idea or this thought that has come in this particular patient. Primary delusions are much easier to detect in acute schizophrenia. If you are seeing a patient, who has been having schizophrenia for years together, right? Somebody who has a chronic paranoid schizophrenia, it's very difficult to elicit primary delusions, because he would have developed a system of delusions, secondary delusions based on that primary delusion. And it may be very difficult to go down, deep down into what was that primary delusion. Now, what are secondary delusions? I already explained. These are delusion-like ideas. These are also called as delusion-like ideas. And these can be seen in acute and transient psychotic disorder, mood disorders like mania, depression. It can also be seen in personality disorders, right? So those are called as secondary delusions. Now, what are the examples, or what are the, how can you still classify the primary delusions? Primary delusions are mostly classified as autochthonous delusion or de novo delusions, delusional percept, delusional atmosphere, and delusional memory. We will look into these things in great detail. What we have to remember is, although the older understanding was that once you have a patient with primary delusion, that is, if you have a patient who has delusional percept, then it is schizophrenia. Such a conclusion, such a psychopathological conclusion is not a really great idea. You will have to look for other information, right, to come to a conclusion of schizophrenia. So it is not pathognomonic of schizophrenia anymore, if you look at recent research, right? But primary delusions are, of course, a very characteristic feature of schizophrenia. Now, what is autochthonous delusion or delusional intuition? Okay, here, and this false idea or this false judgment comes like a lightning bolt out of the blue. The term out of the blue or de novo, it is derived from this example of the bolt of lightning, which just abruptly comes out of nowhere, right? So that is an example for a delusional intuition or autochthonous delusion, right? So the individual suddenly get this idea, and it's very quick. It just crystallizes. The delusion immediately crystallizes, and there is only one stage in this. Okay, there are no multiple stages like what all we saw, right? When we saw the sources of delusional development, we were looking at various stages in which the delusional develops. Whereas in autochthonous delusion, there is only one stage, and the delusion is crystallized out of nowhere, out of the blue, right? Where this can be seen, autochthonous delusion, of course, is very characteristic of schizophrenia, but you can see it in various psychotic disorders, right? You can see it in mood disorders, you can see it in personality disorders, you can see it organic psychosis. So it's widely seen. Then another important thing which is extremely important in your examination viva, it's a favorite question for all examiners. What is a delusional percept? Okay, so delusional percept is defined by the two-memberedness. What do you mean by two-memberedness? There are two stages in the development of this primary delusion. Okay, see, it is not a secondary delusion. Even though there are two stages, right? You will understand here that there is a normal perception, okay, and that leads to a delusional meaning. Okay, and normal perception is not of morbid, it is not a morbid phenomena. That's why you cannot call it as a secondary delusion. Although there are two stages here, this is not an example of a secondary delusion, it is still a primary delusion, because there is a normal perception which is given a delusional meaning, right? For example, a patient, who is 35-year-old, okay, he has been sick for the last 2 months, just 2 months. He comes to you and, his family brings him, and he tells you that when I was a child of 15 years age, I had a spoon in my house which had a royal crown on it, an imprint of a crown on it, right? So now I know, right? So that was a normal perception. You may even be able to corroborate that with the mother of this patient. The mother may agree that yes, we had a spoon like that which had a crown on the spoon. We used it for a very long time when they were children, right? But the individual is giving a delusional meaning to that normal perception. He comes to this, conclusion based on that normal percept that he is the royal, he comes from a royal family and he is the emperor or the king of this of this country, right? That is a delusional meaning which is given to a normal perception. So that is why it has two stages, and it may be also called as two-memberedness, which is a very characteristic feature of a delusional percept. All right. Now, what is delusional atmosphere? This is another example for primary delusion. Delusional atmosphere has also been called as delusional mood, right? Some, some researchers, some psychiatrists differentiate between delusional atmosphere and delusional mood, because they say that delusional atmosphere may have various perceptual disturbances or cognitive disturbances in addition to disturbance in mood, right? Whereas, there may be a set of individuals who only have a mood which is delusional, okay? And what happens in delusional atmosphere? Basically, this individual starts, feeling as if the whole environment around him is taking up a very sinister meaning. Everything that he sees around him is appearing very funny, very different, okay? And he's getting new meanings from very day-to-day things which appear very unusual to him at this point of time. So what happens is this individual who starts feeling that something is wrong around me, but is unable to find what is wrong around him, he starts anticipating that something is going to happen. He doesn't know whether it is good or bad. In fact, sometimes patients may be excited even that, there may be something really great which is coming in my life, right? Or they may be horrified, perplexed, or uncomfortable, or they may be completely apprehensive or anxious. They may be agitated because they are unable to find an answer why this is, why the world around me is seeming so unusual, right? And when in such an individual who has a delusional atmosphere or who has a delusional mood, when there is development of an autochthonous idea or a sudden delusional idea or development of a delusional perception, they feel so relieved. They feel relieved, very paradoxical, right? The person is developing a delusion, but still he may feel relieved for a moment, for a few days, for a short duration, because he is having an answer for all the questions that were there in his mind, okay? So a sudden delusional idea or delusional percept can arise out of delusional atmosphere or mood, okay? So that is delusional atmosphere or delusional mood. The fourth type of delusional, primary delusion is delusional memory. Okay, so there is a lot of confusion about delusional memory. Some textbooks say that, like a delusional percept, if there is a normal memory, if there is a delusional meaning given to the normal memory, that is a delusional memory. Okay, but then somebody may ask me, okay, I have a memory that there was a crown on my spoon, and now I give a delusional meaning. Isn't that delusional percept, right? So that is the problem with this kind of explanation which is given in some textbooks. Okay, so what I would suggest is stick to retrospective delusions. Okay, so what I mean by retrospective delusion is the individual, I will explain with an example. It's always better. It is given in fish, the newer fish. Okay, so you have a patient who believes that he comes from a royal family because as a child, when he was in a parade, the military general saluted him. Okay, and what you may see is the military general saluting him itself may be a false memory. It may not exist in reality, but this individual just dates back this delusion. Basically, he does not accept, he's just sick from 2 months, but he dates back his delusion to his childhood. Okay, so the delusion is in the memory. I think you will have to put in some mind and try to understand this. Basically, he has a delusion because he has a false belief that the general saluted him during the parade, and that has not happened. His family members corroborate that, but still he believes that there was a military general in the parade who saluted him, right? So the delusion is in the memory itself, or the person is dating back the memory to a past event. So that is retrospective delusion, or you can call it as delusional memory also. And the first explanation is very confusing. You may get confused, right? So stick with the fish definition of delusional memory and don't go by Sims, which basically confuses you. And then we will come to understand like what is, how these delusions originate. Okay, what are the stages in the origin of delusions? Okay, we already looked at the sources of delusional development, but we will look at in general how most of the delusions originate. Okay, what are the steps in the development? Okay, if you look phenomenologically, okay, not in a very not looking at whether there is a perceptual disturbance which is leading to faulty thinking. We will not go into such a rational stepwise logical thing. We will look at the phenomena that happen, the psychopathology that is seen. So the stages are given by Conrad. Okay, and these stages are trema, apophany, anastrophe, consolidation, and residuum. So what is trema? Trema is basically it is very, very similar to delusional atmosphere or delusional mood, where everything is seeming unusual. The person is very anxious, apprehensive, excited. He is anticipating what is going to come. That is the stage of trema. What is apophany? Apophany is where the individual is searching desperately for some explanation about what is happening with him, right? So he's just looking for some answers, right? And during apophany, he may find some answers. There may be a sudden delusional idea, or there may be, a delusional percept. And what is anastrophe? Anastrophe is the heightening of psychosis. Once this idea comes in his mind that he is the emperor of India, right? So the psychosis gets stronger and stronger. It just extends. The conviction increases. It becomes, it starts impacting too much on the psyche of the individual. There is too much pressure. There is too much affective tone, right? So anastrophe, or the heightening of psychosis. What is consolidation? Consolidation is where the process of delusional work and the delusional process happens, the systematization happens, and the individual has created his own world of network of delusions. That is a consolidation stage. And what is residuum? When this stage is, when he reaches this stage of consolidation, it lasts for a very long time. He goes into this kind of a withdrawal and he's into his own world. He goes into this autistic state, which is something called as the residuum. Okay. But, you can see in certain cases that, you directly have anastrophe, you don't have trema and apophany. The example is autochthonous delusion, where you suddenly have an idea and there is heightening of psychosis. There may not be much of trema or apophany, right? But sudden delusional idea can arise in, in the background of trema and apophany also. All right. So this is how delusions originate, the step-by-step, explanation. Now, what is systematization? Systematization is basically the delusional work or the delusional process that happens. So basically, as depicted in the picture, there is one primary delusion, that's that one autochthonous delusion or delusional percept that arises in this individual, and he starts weaving lot of delusions, around that primary delusion. As time passes, there is a huge network of delusions which is created. All right, and they have lot of logical consistency, what I called as disorganization as one of the vectors of delusions, which Kendler gave, right? So this delusional work and the creation of systematization is something called as the delusional process or delusional work. And the most beautiful example for delusional work or systematization, of course, you can see in various psychotic disorders and like schizophrenia. But if you get delusional disorder persecutory type, you may have a beautiful description from the patient about how he builds the world of delusion around him, how he accommodates people around him into the delusional community, right? So that is systematization. Now, some of you may be interested in knowing how does a delusion resolve, right? Like, for example, when you start treating the patient, what happens to the form of delusion? We have not still come to the content of delusions. How does a delusion disappear? Or how does a delusion, what is the course of a delusion, right? What you can easily see in your clinical practice is all the vectors of delusion that I was talking about: the conviction, extension, disorganization, pressure, affective tone, all those acting out and all such things that you see, all the vectors of delusional severity, they may go on becoming lesser and lesser, right? So you definitely see patients, once they are put on treatment, the conviction level that they have about their false belief becomes a little shaky, right? Or an individual still believes that people are around to kill him, but he starts going for work. So extension reduces, okay? The individual who is totally preoccupied with this thought that Martians are, coming to India and taking him to space, he starts, he starts thinking about other things. He starts thinking about his family. He starts thinking about he has to take his child to the park for playing, So basically, the preoccupation or the pressure reduces, right? So the thought disorder, the disorganization that happens, the systematization that happens, that goes on reducing. The secondary delusions that have developed goes on breaking. So slowly over a period of time, he believes that, okay, this doctor is really wanting to help me. He is not in hands with my conspirer. Okay. He starts believing you. He starts taking the medicine which is given by the nurse without creating a big ruckus, which he created the first day, thinking that the nurse is, in hands in glove with the person who is his persecutor, right? So that is, the description of how the vectors of delusional severity goes on reducing. And there are some, descriptions which are mostly of historical interest, something called as double bookkeeping. You may all know, why this term is used. Double bookkeeping is something like, if somebody is a businessman, somebody is from a family of businessman background, you always keep one book which is given to the auditors and one book for yourself. Okay. And of course, the profits and, the income that you show, the revenue that you show, that you give to the auditor is much lesser, mostly, right? So that is double bookkeeping. So how does it apply to the resolution of delusion? Basically, an individual may believe that he is the emperor of India, but still he may come and, swipe the floor. If in a rehabilitation center, if they are telling him to, clean his room himself, so he may be seen sweeping his floor. He still believes that he is emperor of India. That delusion is not going away, but still he is doing sweeping and cleaning work also. He washes his plates after food, right? So basically that is double bookkeeping. He believes he's an emperor. He does all the work of a commonplace man also, right? What is encapsulation? Encapsulation is where, you try to imagine that the delusion is sort of shelled off in the psyche of the individual. This is beautifully shown in the movie Beautiful Mind, which was based on the prodigal mathematician John Nash, who died on World Schizophrenia Day, if you know, a few years back, right? So he was suffering from schizophrenia, John Nash. And the movie Beautiful Mind, you should watch it to really understand the development of delusions. It's very, very realistic depiction, although there are some problems in the depiction. So the individual, the protagonist in the movie, which is John Nash, basically, at the end of the movie, he received the Nobel Prize, and when he is outside the Nobel Prize hall where he got the Nobel Prize, he still is looking, and he believes that some people who he has been thinking that they are some people who don't exist in his life in reality, he still is able to see them, and he is still able to converse with them. So basically, this individual is able to function well, he is able to get the Nobel Prize, but still that part is there somewhere in his psyche. So that is encapsulation. So the delusion is basically, shelled off in a corner of the mind of that person, and it does not really intrude too much. Okay. Whereas in double bookkeeping, it's not like that. The individual is not fully functional. The individual still believes that he's Emperor of India. So he wouldn't function well once he is left out of the hospital. But he will sweep his room. He will wash his clothes. Okay. He does not ask for a royal treatment. So that is the difference between double bookkeeping and encapsulation. And of course, another way of resolution is, of course, remission, where the delusion just disappears, right? In good prognosis, schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders with good prognosis. Now, coming to content of delusions, I may have to, run through them quickly, because most of you are quite good at content of delusion. So I will not really go into too much of elaboration on these things. First, of course, is delusion of persecution. This screenshot is again from the movie, Beautiful Mind, showing this actor. I forgot his name. Yeah. So basically, a delusion of persecution is when an individual thinks that there are people who are, who are out to get him, who want to harm him, who are conspiring something to kill him, right? Or planning to malign him, or planning to kill his family, or planning to make him bankrupt or spoil his image in the society. Those are examples of delusion of persecution. Delusion of persecution may be a primary delusion. It may be an autochthonous idea or a delusional percept. It may be secondary to hallucinations. So they may be delusion-like ideas or secondary hallucinations. You can also have delusion of persecution secondary to passivity phenomena, right? For example, if an individual has the phenomena of thought withdrawal, he may think that it was, the thoughts are being withdrawn by an alien, satellite. Okay. The aliens who are in Mars. Okay. They are taking out thoughts from his mind. So that's an example for how delusion of persecution develops secondary to passivity phenomena. Right. And of course, thought disorder. For example, if an individual has thought block, right? So the individual may develop a delusion of persecution secondary to thought block, because he starts thinking that there is an external agency who is, depriving him of his thoughts, right? And sometimes we see, residents making this mistake of calling delusion of persecution as paranoid thoughts, okay? But, although it is very commonly used in the general public that this individual is paranoid, the original use of the word, of course, the origin of the word paranoid was that, beside the mind. The word in Latin means that it's para-nous, that is beside the mind, okay, which may probably mean that somebody is out of his mind, right? So basically, the older understanding of paranoia was that this individual is delusional. He may have a delusion of persecution, he may have a delusion of grandiosity, right? So, but, and also delusional disorders were called paranoia in the past, right? But it is used in such common, in common language, that paranoid sometimes is equated with delusion of persecution. I think psychiatrists, as students getting trained in psychiatry, you should not be making the mistake. You should try to differentiate. Paranoid basically means somebody who is deluded. Okay, so it may be a delusion of persecution, or it may be a delusion of grandiosity also. Then there is delusion of infidelity, also called as delusion of jealousy, right? And it's very characteristically seen in patients who are dependent on alcohol, in alcohol dependence syndrome, and a delusional disorder, very peculiar delusional disorder called Othello syndrome, based on the character Othello in the book Othello by Shakespeare, where Othello kills his wife because he feels that the wife is cheating on him, right? So I think I already touched upon delusion of infidelity already. Why delusion of infidelity is very important for us is it can lead to violence towards the partner, right? If the spouse believes that his spouse is cheating on him or her, then it may lead to violence. It may even lead to homicide, right? There are many, many reports where, you know, the wife or the husband kills his spouse because he has this delusion of infidelity. And what is delusion of love? You know, it's also called as erotomania, and it's a very characteristic delusion seen in de Clerambault syndrome. De Clerambault, you know, was the psychiatrist, you know, who described delusion of love or erotomania. The first case report on erotomania was given by de Clerambault, so that is named after him. So delusion of love can be seen in schizophrenia and personality disorders. And what do you see in delusion of love? Usually an individual of a lower social, social status believes that, you know, an individual who is from a higher social status, for example, an individual believes that a celebrity, okay, like Priyanka Chopra is in love with him, okay. Priyanka Chopra is trying desperately to send messages to him. She keeps sending letters to him, but some conspirators are, you know, in Indian post office are basically taking away those letters and, you know, they are making sure that those letters don't reach him. When he looks at Priyanka Chopra in the TV screen, it, you know, she winks at him. She gives innumerable cues that, you know, how badly she is in love with him. And he makes desperate attempts to go and meet Priyanka Chopra and gets into all sort of problems and legal problems, right? So that's a beautiful example of delusion of love, where usually an individual in, you know, from a lower societal status believes that an individual from higher societal status loves him, right? So that is delusion of love. What is delusion of grandeur? You can see three types of delusion of grandeur. One is of identity, special identity, that, you know, I am the Prime Minister of India. Special ability, that I have supernatural powers, you know, I can make it rain in Mangalore right now, okay? Or delusion of mission, where I believe that God has sent me on earth to basically eradicate COVID-19, you know, completely from the face of this earth, right? So that, you know, these are some of the types of delusion of grandeur: identity, ability, and mission. And where do you see delusion of grandeur or grandiosity? Bipolar disorder, mania. You can see it, you know, there are reports of neurosyphilis, or what was called previously as general paralysis of insane, developing delusion of grandiosity. Also, you can get delusion of grandiosity in schizophrenia, right? And some researchers think that when you have a delusion of grandiosity in schizophrenia, you usually, you know, get delusion of mission, you know, the delusion of grandeur, mission type. All right. So that is delusion of grandiosity. Then there is delusion of ill health. You know, you peculiarly see these delusions of ill health, or also called as hypochondriac delusions, in people who have a premorbid personality, such that they are excessively concerned about their health. They frequently, you know, get very concerned about minor issues with their health. You know, they are a little feverish. They think that they have COVID-19, right? I think most of us would have felt such things during this pandemic, right? But I'm not talking about that, right? So somebody who is excessively concerned, who is, you know, always getting entangled into the healthcare system, you know, who's behind his doctor that, okay, I have some problem in my head, you know. So always, you know, but, you know, this delusion of ill health is precipitated usually in the background of depression. You know, people with depressive disorder develop this delusion of ill health when there is a severe ill health in an individual. You know, in an individual who has excessive health concern, if he has ill health, or if he has a complication arising out of a surgery, or a complication, for example, during COVID-19, you may have seen, you know, you suffer from, you are diagnosed with COVID-19, you are locked in a hospital, you are isolated, you are quarantined, and you may have heard about COVID-19 suicides that happen, you know, people ending up dying because they get, you know, sort of delusion that they have very severe disorder, COVID disorder, and they will not survive from this, okay? Or you may have seen people who think that they have COVID-19, they would have probably spread it to all their family members, whole family will be wiped out from the face of the earth. So better I kill myself, because I will not be able to handle the shame, you know, because I gave COVID-19 to my young children, you know, who should have had a bright future. So such is the presentation of delusion of ill health, right? And many times you can see suicides as well as homicides, okay? Homicides where the person believes that he has infected his family members, and that's why he has to, you know, die by suicide and also kill all his family members, right? Mostly they have a depressive presentation, you know, they have a depressive disorder, and they may also believe to have some serious disease such as AIDS or cancer or some serious disease or terminal disease or fatal disease, right? You can also get delusions of ill health or hypochondriacal delusions in schizophrenia. Again, what you have to remember is body dysmorphic disorder, which is now classified under obsessive compulsive and related disorders, OCRD, has a specifier in DSM-5 called as absent insight. If you have an individual who has a belief and does not have insight, absent insight, then you can call it as a delusion, that individual has a delusion, right? And what is body dysmorphic disorder? The individual is preoccupied with minor blemishes or minor problems in his body, like he feels that his nose is slightly deviated to the left, although no matter how many skin specialists or plastic surgeons he visits, nobody is ready to believe that his nose is a little to one side. And if some money minded the plastic surgeon operates on him, he's gone, right? Probably he will have a legal suit and the plastic surgeon's career may end, right? Or there have been instances where an individual goes and kills the plastic surgeon because he has not done a good nose job, right? So delusion of ill health can present like that, right? And delusion of guilt, basically this develops in an individual who pre-morbidly is too self-critical, who has a very self-critical attitude, and he may believe that he's a sinner or he's an evil person, okay, when he is having a delusion of guilt. I had a patient when I was doing my MD training in Ranchi. The patient believed that, doctor, I came from Bihar to Jharkhand, and after I came to Jharkhand, there was a there was a news of a flood in the newspaper. She told that because I landed in Jharkhand, I brought all the bad omen, and that's why there is floods in Jharkhand and people are dying because of me. So that is delusion of guilt, that they are a very evil person. They can lead to evil consequences. Sometimes it can have a kind of a grandiose feel to it, like an individual feeling that he has brought floods, right? But you will have to classify it as, delusion of guilt. Nihilistic delusions you can see in depression sometimes. It's also called as delusion of negation, right? You will see it in severe depression, where an individual may say that I do not exist, my mind does not exist, my body does not exist, my organs are rotting, It may be seen in schizophrenia. It may be seen in something called as Cotard syndrome, where nihilistic delusion is the most important characteristic psychopathology, right? So that is nihilistic delusion. Then there is delusion of poverty, right? In a person with depression, he may believe that he is, of no good at all, and all the world's poverty is basically, cursed on him. That is delusion of poverty. And then there are some very interesting misidentification delusions. I will highlight two important ones here. One is Capgras delusion, where there is hypo-identification. That is, an individual with Capgras syndrome, he believes that, a close relative is not actually his relative. He's an imposter, who has replaced his relative, right? So what happens is the facial processing, the center for facial processing, which gets abnormal in prosopagnosia, if you have read about prosopagnosia or facial recognition systems. So the processing is, there is some problem in the connection between facial processing and emotions that should arise. So when you look at your mother, it does not give the emotions that you get when you look at your mother. So basically the individual starts thinking that, no, this is not my mother. This is basically an imposter in place of my mother. So there is hypo-identification. It is actually his mother, but he is hypo-identifying. Whereas Frigoli, which is named after, you can see the picture in the background of Frigoli's picture is also there, as well as, he was a genius when it came to wearing various disguises. In his act, in the theater, he used to come as various persons throughout the act of 1 or 2 hours. Okay. He was a master of disguise. So basically in Frigoli syndrome, the individual feels there is hyper-identification. So the individual feels that, all the members in his family are basically a famous celebrity. Okay. My mother is not actually my mother. She is, maybe Priyanka Chopra. My father is also Priyanka Chopra. My brother is also Priyanka Chopra. But Priyanka Chopra is coming in various disguises. So although it is your mother, you are recognizing her as Priyanka Chopra. So basically you are hyper-identifying. And the name Frigoli comes from the, as I already told, Italian actor called Leopoldo Frigoli. Now, what is a shared delusion? Shared delusion, the name for shared delusions is basically folie à deux, where two individuals, one individual has a delusion, and because the other individual is having a lot of influence from the first individual, the second individual starts developing these delusional ideas secondary to the first person having some delusional disorder, right? So the two individuals share certain delusion, that is shared delusion. Now, when it comes to suicidal thoughts, so far we have seen delusions. Now we will quickly come to suicidal thoughts. So suicidal thoughts are usually recurrent and intrusive. It's usually seen in patients who have melancholic symptoms. An individual who is sad, who is despondent, who has overwhelming apprehension in crisis, who is angry, extremely angry towards a person, can develop suicidal thoughts. And if you look at the sociological theories, Durkheim's theories and Durkheim's 4 types of suicides, you can see that if there is not enough regulation in the society, and because of some poorly regulated stock market, an individual loses crores of his money in stock market, that individual is devastated. He's unable to cope with the situation in the society. He commits, sorry, I should not use the word commit, it's no longer an offense. So he ends his life by, suicide. That is called as anomic suicide. Fatalistic suicide is where there is too much regulation in the society. The society becomes so much dictatorial that you are unable to, cope with the regulations. That's why you end up your life. That is fatalistic suicide. And then there is a dimension of integration, where if there is too much integration into the society, the person, thinks that he can sacrifice himself for the society. You may have heard about kamikaze and harakiri in Japan during the World War. So kamikaze was these fighter pilots who used to come and ramage their planes onto the Pearl Harbor ships, right? That was altruistic suicide, example of altruistic suicide. And another thing, maybe there is so much less integration with the society that once the person develops some, stressor, he is unable to get any social support. He feels very ashamed, and he ends his life by suicide, which can be called as egoistic suicide. Then there are homicidal thoughts, which can be usually seen. Homicidal thoughts can normally occur in individuals, right? But mostly people do not act. Most people who have homicidal thoughts do not end up, committing a murder, right? But homicidal thoughts are frequently seen in patients who are dependent on substances. They can be seen in dissocial personalities. On a rare occasion, you can see it in psychotic disorders also. Then we come to possession of thought, right? So possession of thought, as I had discussed in the previous seminar itself, basically you feel that your thoughts are private. Nobody can know them. Okay. It's just inside my head. You have complete control over them. You have complete volition over them. But in certain disorders, you feel that they are not private anymore. Others are interfering with it. They are controlling it. You don't have the will, or, it is not under your will or volition. So one of the examples for such disorders of possession is obsession. And obsession is an irrational, repetitive, intrusive thought, which can be an idea, image, or impulse. It is experienced as one's own thought. It appears against the will of the individual, but the individual tries to resist them at times. He can resist them with good effort. And it is usually associated with a lot of anxiety and guilt. And what will be the content of obsession? The form may be idea, image, or impulse. Content may be of sexual obsession, dirt obsession, harm, violence, or blasphemous thoughts. And the interesting thing is, a person who has sexual obsession may be diametrically opposite in personality. He may even not look at a woman, right, when he is in a class or when he is in the park, right? But still he may get sexual thoughts, sexual obsessions. A person who is extremely clean may get thoughts of dirt and contamination. Individual who would not even think of harming an ant thinks of killing his daughter. An individual who is very, very, religious and orthodox, very orthodox person, very orthodox religious, he may get blasphemous thoughts where he is scolding and telling all sorts of bad words towards his God, right? So obsessions can be seen, of course, in obsessive compulsive disorder, but you can see them in depression, schizophrenia, as well as organic disorders. Now coming to thought alienation, another type of disorder of possession. Here, you may have thought insertion, where the individual believes that somebody is putting thoughts inside his head, an external agency is interfering with his thoughts. Or it can be thought withdrawal, where somebody, some external agency is taking thoughts out of the individual's mind, which the individual may experience as a thought block if that happens, right? or it can be thought broadcasting, where the individual may feel that when he is thinking, everybody is thinking in unison, or the thoughts from his mind are seeping out of his head, or the person may feel that his thoughts, whenever he's thinking something, it is heard aloud and everybody is able to hear it, which is called in German as Gedankenlaut werden. Or it can be something like a thought echo or echo de la pensis, right? So those are different ways in which thought broadcasting can appear, right? So these are examples for thought alienation. And ideally, don't use the word delusions of passivity. Don't use the term delusion of passivity. Some textbooks describe these thought alienation phenomena as delusions of passivity, but it's always best to describe it under possession, disorders of possession. So how do you assess? To make it very quick, you can use some semi-structured clinical interviews like SCAN, which is schedules for clinical assessment in neuropsychiatry, or present state examination, PSC, which is also available in Hindi, and rating scales like brief psychiatric rating scale, SAPS, SAPS and PANSS, which has items for positive symptoms and delusions. And of course, you can use projective tests, which I described last time. So that is about assessment. Coming to conclusion, of course, delusions are seen in psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia and delusional disorder, but there may be thought abnormalities such as overvalued ideas, which can be seen in normal individuals, as well as people who have certain psychiatric disorders, right? Just a false belief does not mean a delusion. You have to understand the conceptual issues surrounding, delusions. And medical and neurological disorders can also present with delusion. No form is pathognomonic. Okay, no form, just a primary delusion does not mean schizophrenia. And no, delusions are not specific of any pathophysiology, right? It just tells about the severity of psychopathology, but not anything about pathophysiology in most cases. I would like to add one erratum in the end. In the last session, I told, somebody asked me the question, verbigeration versus perseveration. I wrongly told that verbigeration is jargon aphasia or word salad. I was wrong. Verbigeration is basically a form of stereotypy where, a set of words or set of phrases is repeated, without lack of control. So it is mostly like a disorder of volition, whereas perseveration is mostly a disorder of, basically difficulty in set shifting. It's a cognitive problem, right? That's why you see it in frontal disorders. So I thought I would add that correction in the end. With that, I would, like to finish this marathon session. I would hand it over to the moderators if any questions are there.
Thank you very much, sir.
Dr. Narayan.
Yes, sir. So you can go ahead.
No, just I thank Dr. Ravichandra for giving a very lucid presentation, to the point, and clarifying quite a few of the confusion or doubts usually people have, especially the students. Not that we don't have, we too have some confusion about certain things. Now, because of lack of time, maybe he was not able to include certain things that I am sure. Few things I would like to add to what Dr. Ravichandra has said is, in delusions, you can see, especially in schizophrenia, loosening of association when it comes to systematization and elaboration. They might show loosening of association in the way they associate his belief with a person or with a thing. And also there can be over-inclusion, like whoever comes into this, I feel during a particular event, he intends to include, even if he is, not at all concerned with him, he doesn't know him. There is an over-inclusiveness phenomenon also. Then, the good example of delusion underlying a cognitive deficit is, as Dr. Ravichandra has said, it is a Capgras and other identity disorders. Then the person fails to recognize the face. He has prosopagnosia, and it is again related to Gestalt. But what is interesting in delusion of, Capgras, delusion, there is an example of a man who had a delusion that his mother is a not a real mother, she is an imposter. Whenever mother came to the ward, he refused to see her. He always shouted at her saying that you are not my mother. But she reported to psychiatrist that whenever I call him over the phone, he talks to me and talks to me properly as though I am his real mother, which indicates that probably the association areas with visual cortex is probably dysfunctional, whereas the association areas with the auditory cortex is intact. So there seems to be a selective lesion or a functional lesion in certain particular association areas, which gives rise to this. Then, when it comes to delusion formation, two things that I would like to add to what has been told. There is an error in the logic. Logic, we know normally logic can be inductive or deductive. In inductive, you believe a thing and try to induct things to support the belief. In deductive, you go from periphery, take some events and try to group them together or relate to each other and ultimately come to a conclusion. For example, a crime has taken place. If you have an inductive logic, you think so and so must have done it. That is your first conclusion. And you try to induct events to support this belief. And this is what happens very often in acute psychotic episodes and also in schizophrenia. Whereas the other way, deductive logic is you have been accumulating evidences without knowing why this is happening. And one fine day you put them together and you come to a fairly convincing belief. For example, a person says, in my office, people belong to my community are being insulted. They are not being given promotions. And he has come to that logic right from the day of his, getting into the particular work. And then he has quite a few evidences ultimately to prove that he is being, victimized. So often you find in delusional disorders, they use error in the deductive logic. That's why the delusional disorder delusions are not bizarre, non-bizarre. Whereas they are bizarre when it comes to schizophrenia. And that bizarreness is attributed by the loosening of association, over-inclusive thinking, all that contribute to the loosening of the bizarre delusions. And in that context, I would like to say, though Fish also talks about disorder of possession of thought, and they have included of late obsessions and other things in it, but actually the disorder of possession of thought, especially the passivity concerning the thought process, thought withdrawal, thought insertion, all that, aren't they delusions? Actually, they are delusions. And in fact, they are bizarre delusions. At least till now, they have remained bizarre. I don't know whether, we will come out with a technique of knowing others' thought, but till that time, they are bizarre. So actually, they are bizarre delusions, which have been included in the disorder of possession of thought. Just a point, controversial point about this. Now, delusional memory. Again, one way of looking at delusional memory is memory of an event which has not occurred. Like we had a lady who said that in my school days, I had a quarrel with one particular girl. And now after my marriage, her brother is trying to poison the mind of my husband, telling him that I am not faithful. Now, looking at it and asking others in the family, they do not remember any event where she had fought. Maybe she has had a fight, but it was not worth being included. But she uses that particular piece of memory to substantiate her claim that so and so is trying to do this. So this is about delusional memory. So these are the few additional points that I am trying to make, so that it will, people can think about it and look into the literature about this. And if it comes to pathophysiology, most of the disorders of possession of thought insertion, thought withdrawal, thought broadcast, actually are deficits in the cognitive function, which is called as source monitoring. When we get a thought, we know it is my thought, because there is a source monitoring which tells me that you are thinking like this. Now, if that is missing, a thought comes to your mind and you say, no, this is not my thought. So how do I explain it? I use a delusion that people are trying to insert it into my head. So this is how it is interpreted in pathophysiology of this particular passivity phenomena concerning the thought. So that's what I wanted to add to what Dr. Ravichandra has said. Of course, Dr. Ravichandra probably did not have enough time to include all these things, but he has extensively dealt with what is essentially required from the point of view of a student. Thank you. And now I request Dr. Mutalik to go ahead with questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for the concluding remarks and certain controversies what you have explained. But we have too many questions here, so we need to ask the speaker whether he can answer all the questions or not, because of the time constraints.
Sir, it depends on all of you, because if you have got some commitments, I think we need to just stick to few questions. I personally don't have any issues. If you want me, I can go through the whole list. So, you take a call on it, sir, because you are organizing. You take a call. You can choose few questions if you want, sir. So I looked at one or two. Yeah, you can choose, sir.
We will start with what Dr. Hemant Chaudhary has asked. The question is, what makes a delusion ununderstandable? Isn't it a combination of the above stated characteristics described as not unique to delusion?
Right. So basically, what ununderstandability, described by Jaspers was that what Sripati sir was telling, that there is some amount of bizarreness in what the person believes. Okay. And another thing is, it is not understandable based on logic. It is not understandable in the terms that it cannot be understood from a set of other phenomena, right? So basically, like for example, I saw black spots on a cat outside my home, and I think my neighbor is planning to kill me. So basically, the connection is completely not understandable, right? So I don't want to give the wrong message here. Why I discussed about all these aspects of delusion is for you to really think about it, that just some parts of the definition of delusion is not in itself enough. So when you have all these aspects of a delusion, you would be able to make a proper conclusion about whether you have a phenomenon of delusion or not. So that's why I talked about these various aspects of delusion. So hope I have answered your question, Hemant. Next question, we will move.
Yes, sir.
I will only see the chat box. Or
yes,
you will.
Sir.
Yeah. Can you explain disorganization with an example?
Yes,
that's the question.
Yes, sir.
So disorganization, when it comes to the vectors of delusion, which is given by Kendler, is basically disorganization. What he means is the amount of logical consistency in the various ideas, okay, and the systematization. So whether it's basically disorganization means how systematized is the delusion, or whether it is ill systematized. That is the vector basically he's talking about when he talks about disorganization, right? So that's what is about the vector of delusion. Then, does PTSD induce the required kind of intense emotions, or does it require a pervasive state? Yeah. Is it followed by a delusion? Usually. Correct. So, what I can tell you is, there can be a certain occasion where an individual with post-traumatic stress disorder may develop a delusional idea, right? It is quite possible, but it is not a very characteristic feature of PTSD as well, as you know, right? Intense emotions, when it is part of a, when it is there pervasively, as you have mentioned, whether it requires a pervasive state. So when it is pervasively present, can definitely make it a very fertile ground for the development of delusions, right? But you can see other instances where there is an intense emotion. For example, you may have seen cases of acute and transient psychotic disorder in your OPD. The individual loses crores of rupees because of lockdown. His hotel is closed, right? And suddenly he becomes completely psychotic the next day, right? So the intense fear and anxiety itself is leading to some psychotic symptoms, development of certain delusions. So it's not a very pervasive state. It was there for only 1 or 2 days, right? So it, you can am I still online?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
yes, yes.
Yes. Sorry, I just lost a connection in between. So I just lost track of my thoughts also. Yeah. So basically, what I was
Okay, no problem, sir.
So yeah. So PTSD, of course, you don't see delusions, but other examples that
Sir, your mic is mute. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So so that's the question on PTSD. Is temperamentally difficult children high risk to meet delusional disorder? Maybe psychotic symptoms such as hallucinations and delusions. What is the difference between delusional perception and delusion of reference? All delusions are referential. All delusions are self-referential. So this concept of delusion, but if you want to really think about it, delusional perception, you have a percept and you have a delusional meaning that you are giving to the normal percept. And whatever delusional meaning you are giving is very self-referential. That is the one important characteristic that they describe when you see there's some amount of self-referential thinking in delusional perception itself, right? So I don't think there is any point in discussing differences between delusional perception and delusion of reference. Yeah, Russell Crowe was the actor who was John Nash. Thank you for that, somebody. So can you throw light on elaboration of delusion and delineate between elaboration and systematization, as some controversies exist between them? Okay, so I think this is a difficult question. I'm not really sure about this, but as far as I have understood, elaboration means, when there is a well systematized delusion, when there is a network of delusions developed around a primary delusion, that itself is the delusional process or delusional work that happens leads to elaboration, right? So I think they are pretty much the same, if you ask me, right? And delusion of enormity, I think delusion of enormity, of course, is very it's completely opposite to delusion of poverty, where the individual feels that he is cursed with poverty, whereas a person may feel that he has a Akshay Patra, right? Or he has so much money that he can infinitely go on spending it. It may be an example for delusion of enormity. How tremor, apopheny, anastrophe, etc. are modulated with respect to neuronal connectivity, signaling, and neurochemical changes, and what role environmental cues play while moving through the sequential changes. I think what I would like to highlight here is, I think there is not enough time to really go into all these aspects. But what I can definitely tell you is Dr. Sripati Rao, Dr. Sripati Bhatt sir, leads to faulty thinking or jumping to conclusion or difficulty in source monitoring. You can go back and read these abnormalities in cognitive processes, which are basically the neuropathological changes or the neuropsychological changes that are happening, which lead to the experience of psychopathology of tremor, apopheny, and anastrophe, basically, right? So please explain suicidal thoughts. Yeah, suicidal thoughts is something which I did not really go into too much detail, but I would like to say that
Sir, there is some connectivity issue. You are not quite
suicide, there
audible.
is so much to discuss. It's definitely they are very intrusive and distressing and recurrent thoughts when they are experienced. Talks about suicidal thoughts, you have to consider. Of course, you should do. I think I will not be able to help it, so I'll go through it. Yeah, how to differentiate between somatic hallucination and delusional parasitosis. Okay, I think this question will arise where you have a tactile hallucination of bugs crawling on your skin, right? And delusional parasitosis. An individual with tactile hallucinations will mostly, or cocaine bugs, for example, or in delirium, you may see these tactile hallucinations. They are mostly concerned about the crawling sensation and the abnormal sensation. Whereas in delusional parasitosis, the individual may feel that a parasite is inhibiting either his skin or the subcutaneous tissue or his internal organs. And he goes into great detail about describing, this parasite. It has got these big eyes, it has got these whiskers, it has so many legs, it keeps crawling here and there. He goes more into the, describing the, basically this parasite, so much interest in describing the parasite rather than only the focus on the false perception, right? That may be a very simple answer, okay, to differentiate. Can you please describe development of normal beliefs? Oh my God. I think this is something which I will not be able to cover. I don't think I will be able to do justice also on this, even if I try. So delusions of influence, I think, of course, a delusion of influence is something like delusion of control again. Okay. And I think, is there any difference between implausible and impossible? Of course, when you define a bizarre delusion, you say that it is implausible. No matter how much logic you use or no matter how much imagination you use, you are unable to explain that particular phenomena. That is implausible. Whereas, things which are thought of as impossible once become possible. I think Sripati Rao sir, I keep telling him Sripati Rao sir, Sripati Bhatt sir, beautifully told that, someday you may be able to see what thought is running in your head, and then it becomes impossible, something which was impossible became possible, at this time it is implausible, right? And I think encapsulation I told, right? The individual is able to function better, all his the extension reduces, pressure reduces, acting out reduces, but still that belief is held in a corner of his psyche. If you look at the vectors of delusion, you'll be able to beautifully explain encapsulation. Then difference with preoccupation and obsession. Of course, you may be preoccupied with a movie that you have to watch after this, seminar, but obsession is something which is, you think that that is irrational, it is nonsensical, and it is too intrusive, and it has all other features where they have very typical themes, when it comes to obsession, that there are themes of dirt and contamination, there are themes of sexual content, there are themes of harm, whereas preoccupation, you may be preoccupied with any thought. It may be just a silly thought, it may be a false thought, it may be a fantastic thought, so you may be preoccupied with anything. So that's the difference between those. And delusion of misinterpretation, I already told, they are mostly secondary delusions. Some sensory information is interpreted as a delusion, right? So that is delusions of misinterpretation. So I gave the example that my neighbor is knocking. I already believe that my neighbor is planning to kill me. So the knock on the door, I think that the neighbor is standing outside with a knife. So that is delusional misinterpretation. So I think, Narayan, we can stop there.
Yes, definitely, sir, definitely. You have answered almost, not almost, all the questions.
Yes, thank you.
It was a very wonderful webinar. Again, one more
Okay.
question.
Okay.
That is the difference between somatic passivity and delusion of control.
Okay. Delusion of control, of course, somatic passivity, where there are various aspects. Somatic passivity is described where an individual is a reluctant recipient, a very passive and reluctant recipient of external sensations or perceptions, right? Which is imposed upon him by an external agency. That is somatic passivity. Okay. That additional thing of perceptions being imposed upon him is there. Whereas delusion of control, you may feel that some external agency is controlling your thoughts, some external agency is controlling your actions. That is delusion of control. Yeah. Yes.
Actually, Sripati Bhatt sir wants to speak.
Yeah. Before
Yes, sir.
concluding,
Go ahead, sir.
I would like to draw attention of all our postgraduates to one particular thing which explains delusion, that is errors in the syllogism. It is also called von Damiras, errors of syllogism. This is, normally we use a type of logic. For example, the example often given is Socrates was a man, so he died. So we are all men, so men are mortal. Now, this is a syllogistic thinking which makes sense. But then the error can be, for example, all birds fly. Some insects also fly. That's how we understand. But a person with error in this syllogistic thinking, he puts it the other way around. All birds fly, some insects also fly, so some insects are birds. See the difference. And somehow there seems to be this kind of a logical error occurring in the thinking of person with schizophrenia. So this is type 1 error. Then there is type 2 error. Mary was virgin, I am virgin, so I am Virgin Mary. So this is another kind of an error in the syllogistic thinking. I would like PGs to read about it. It is called von Damiras errors in the syllogism. And it would probably give you some idea how the delusion is formed in some of these schizophrenics. And I think we had a very productive, fruitful evening with Dr. Ravichandra presenting the topic in a very lucid manner. And the fact that he mentioned, our Priyanka Chopra 2-3 times, I hope his wife doesn't take him to task today. Anyway, it was lighter vein. And we should thank him for presenting a thing so lucidly. Thank you very much, Ravi Chandra. Narayan, if you have anything to say, you can.
Thank you very much. It was a
I think there is some connection problem with Narayan sir. I want to conclude the session with permission of Bhatt sir. Today's session was excellently put. All the important concepts have been explained by sir so beautifully with so many examples and illustrations. And Bhatt sir has refilled all those things which did not come to discussion because of lack of time. I want to take this opportunity to thank Ravichandra Karkal sir for accepting this task and completing it so beautifully. And I want to thank Bhatt sir for taking off the time from his busy schedule to chair the sessions and explain the postgraduates, the various concepts so clearly. Narayan sir, you're there?
Yes, thank you. I had some
Yes, sir.
I had some connectivity issues. Thank you very much, sir. Dr. Ravichandra Karkala, you have elaborated each and every.
Oh. I think Narayan is again disconnected. I would like to.
Yes,
grab this
actually, there are some. Yes,
oh,
yes,
some
I have
problem
come back. I have come back.
with the audio.
Yes, there is some problem with
Okay.
connectivity. Thank you. Again, I would like to thank Dr. Karkala
Yes, sir.
for elaborating each and every minute aspect of form, stream, and position of thought. And it was a very wonderful presentation. And I would like to thank our IBSKC President and Chairperson, Dr. Shripati Bhatt sir, for the valuable and if sir.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you very
I
much.
think we'll call it a day.
to
Thank you. Thank you all.
everyone. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Bijal sir, you want to conclude?
No, thank you, Harish. Thank you, Dr. Ravichandra Karkal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bijal
Thanks
sir.
to TeleRFA team. Thanks to Sriram.
Thank you.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Speaker, and all the panelists as well as the participants. Thank you very much, and we'll meet next week with new
Sure, sir.
topic and new
Yes, sir.
speakers.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
thank you,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.